Welcome, listeners, to Flagship Friday. We are really grateful to have you here today. We have the unique and special privilege of having Raed Hafez, who is an alumni from Iowa State University, and the CEO of Grocer, the fastest growing grocery is what we entitled this, who has just a terrific story. I'll tell you a little bit more about him in a minute. We have Nakaya Rucker here. Nakaya, can you introduce yourself and give our listeners the instructions for the chat?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today's going to be a really great time, as always. I just want to remind everyone to use the Q&A function in order to submit any questions that you have, or even if it's just like a thought that you have while we're having this conversation. Please make sure that you engage throughout this entire conversation. Don't wait until the end. And I actually didn't introduce myself. My name is Nakaya Rucker, and I serve as the External Relations Director of the University Library here at Iowa State.
And Nakaya is also one of our collaborators in the innovation side and has done quite a bit of work on social innovation with our library. And we have also Abram Anders. Abram is our co-founder of the Flagship Friday series and researcher in innovation. And Abram, can you just introduce yourself?
Of course, I'd be happy to. Good afternoon, everyone, or midday. My name is Abram Anders. I'm an associate professor of English, and I direct our ISU Com Foundation courses, the first and second year communication and writing courses. And I do research on innovation and entrepreneurship and leadership communication. So I'm really excited for our conversation today.
Fabulous. And Spencer Braley, you have to show yourself because you do a terrific job for our university, and you won an excellence, a service excellence award because you do such a great job. Show your face if you would, Spencer, just to say hello.
Howdy. Good afternoon.
How are you? Spencer,
I've got to look over there to see everybody's faces.
Spencer is the great and powerful Oz behind the curtain and really does a fabulous job with our technology. And I like to at least a couple times this semester call him out for the great job that he does. Thanks, Spencer.
Thank you much.
All right. Before I formally introduce Raed Hafez, I am going to do our innovation Did You Know fact. And Spencer, will I be able to share my screen for a moment?
You can now. Oh, and now.
Fabulous. So for our innovation, I just wanted to tell you we just launched this fabulous experience for undergraduates. It's just fresh off the presses today. It's an interdisciplinary effort at social innovation for our undergraduates and graduates from all colleges, all countries, all places of life. We are wanting to create a Go Vote platform to motivate Iowa State students to vote. This is funded by the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences and sponsored by the Carrie Chapman Catt Center, the Department of Political Science, and our Student Innovation Center. And I think that if you come to these sessions, you'll hear an interesting story that will surprise you about, one, student voters, but two, specifically student voters in certain disciplines. And I think the data will surprise you as it did me. So we are hoping you will join us. We do have special guest, Dr. Kelly Shaw from Political Science. He was twice elected mayor, and he is a former congressional staffer. And he will be helping us figure out how do we build a strategy for voting on our Iowa State campus. The prizes are significant, $1,500 for first prize, $1,000 for second, and $500 for third. So this is available on our Student Innovation website under Innovation Programming Competitions. So look for Dash Competitions, and that will allow you to sign up. Students have to have at least one team member to join them, and up to a total of 3 team members. So with that, thank you. Very exciting to promote social innovation on our campus. I will introduce Raed Hafez, the fastest growing grocery. I think that you will be as fascinated by his story as I was. He has over 25 years experience in managing large scale technology development and leading large commercial operations. He is Grocer's CEO, the leading online grocery marketplace in the UAE. Raed's deep technology know-how, as well as practical and operational business sense, is driving El Grocer to continue its leadership with cutting-edge customer experiences and brand engagement opportunities. Prior to joining El Grocer, Raed led a local management consulting firm that helped some of the largest regional enterprises in FMCG, insurance, telecom, and healthcare to engage in digital transformation activities. And this is actually a great segue as well, because next week we will be talking, Raed, this might fascinate you, about semiconductors and the shortage of semiconductors. So
awesome.
I think you'll find that fascinating. Previously, Raed led the Middle East and African region of Motorola Mobility, a Google company where he turned around and developed a profitable and growing business. He has an MBA from the world-renowned Kellogg Business School of Management and a BSc in computer engineering from Iowa State University. We are really privileged to have Raed, and I see also we've had Anna Luce join us from College of Design as well. So thank you, Raed. So excited to have you. And Abram, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Well, welcome, Raed. I think we'd love to start off by just hearing a little bit about what you're doing right now. And if you could explain for our audience, what is El Grocer and what does it do? Who does it serve and what's its mission and business model?
Yeah, you bet. Well, first of all, thanks again for having me, guys. It's you're way too kind with your introduction, so thanks again. El Grocer is an online marketplace where we connect consumers with the grocery retailers. We've been adding a lot more specialty retailers, and also we connect them with the FMCG brands. FMCG stands for fast moving consumer goods. So it's your typical food items, packaged goods, fresh fruits and vegetables. And so we connect the consumer with the brands and with the retailers to allow people to be able to order whatever they need, whatever it's their daily needs or their weekly buys. We facilitate all that to happen here. We operate in the UAE. I'm actually talking to you guys from Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. It is 10 p.m. my time, so there's a bit of a time difference. As Karen mentioned, I moved over here back in 2007 with Motorola, who asked me to come and run the region. So it's been a very interesting ride from running a very large region for a very large corporation to going and setting up a startup and from everything from scratch.
Thank you. That's a great introduction. I think in a little bit, we're going to really want to hear about the challenges of that El Grocer is facing now, and maybe how it's handled the recent pandemic. But before we get there, I'd love to kind of delve back into your journey. So you mentioned Motorola. You had this business career, and then you moved to the entrepreneurial side of things. Would you mind taking us through your journey a little bit, some of the highlights and how you arrived at your current moment?
Yeah, I mean, I stayed with Motorola for about 20 years. And the beauty about working for a company like Motorola allowed me to do many different things, work for many different businesses and a lot of different roles. My last role was when I went to our leadership and I said, look, I need an international assignment. Now it's back in 2006. And they actually came through for me. And in about a year, I was asked to move over to Dubai to run Middle East Africa. Actually, at that time, I was running the technology, the product team for all of Asia and Europe. And then I took over the commercial aspects and general management of Middle East Africa. So I would love to say that I had this, moment where I said enough with the corporate jobs and I got to start my own thing. But the reality is I've always wanted to go and do something myself. But it took a major push. Google bought out the company in 2012. At that time, Google had some other plans for the company. And part of that plan was I was asked to pretty much close my region. And I had to go through about 6 months of laying off everyone and closing all customer accounts. I was offered to go back and to take that, to go continue with the corporate role. But I figured that this was the calling. This was the time to say, you know what, enough is enough. Let me take some control of my own destiny. And I started a consulting business with some colleagues of mine. And about a couple of years after that, I was approached by Nader, who's my partner in Grocer. And the idea was extremely interesting. We worked on how would we do this in Middle East and how would we grow it. We brought in some investors, some seed investors, families, friends, and we kicked it off. And so we haven't looked back since. So we're just looking, trying to grow it and see where we can take it.
I have a question because one of the things is, and you're probably shy and modest, but you are incredibly philanthropically driven. There were some really compelling human components that informed your journey and some personal values that really were defining. We've been talking a lot with our young innovators about how values drive decisions. I'm wondering if you can talk about those values that, one, caused you to make the shift from technology into a pretty, that's a pretty radical shift to grocery, right? And two, what it means for you to be in this business where you're dealing with human preferences and really up close and personal.
Thank you again. So when we first, when we decided to get together and put together some kind of a small company, the plan was to start investing into social enterprises. And these are companies that have a social impact rather than just being driven by profitability. We even launched a company that was mainly focused on trying to drive revenues for charities. We quickly found that the best way to do this is to enable people to have jobs, have ways to develop skills, have the ability to create their own businesses. And so with groceries, one of the things that we've done with Grocer is to enable, not just bring on very large supermarkets and hypermarkets and chains. We actually take quite a bit of effort in bringing on board small startups, small mom and pop shops, an entrepreneur that wants to have their own kitchen, an entrepreneur that's looking to introduce, a certain type of, vegan food or gluten-free, dairy-free. And these tend to be very challenged because distribution is the biggest challenge in this kind of a business. So we actually do quite a bit to bring them on board, provide all the facilities, reduce all the costs to make sure that they have a way to go and present it. And again, it's not just philanthropic. It is, we know our consumers want it, right? Our consumers want this. They just struggle to find this type of products and variety. So we simply become a bridge that allows those two to connect with each other.
Yeah. Where would you say you are finding the biggest capacity for innovation? Where are you most challenged to really create something that was never there before?
I mean, look, there's innovation across a lot of different things, right? There's obviously the obvious one where people look at this technology innovation and creating new technologies. The way that I see it is business model innovation. And a business, every business has to have a business model. They need to know how they create value and how they can capture some of that value, right? And so that's where you, as a startup, you're coming in to challenge, established businesses. You're challenging these large hypermarkets that have, millions, if not billions, to spend and to go and fight you. And the only way that you can win is that you're always a few steps ahead of them on execution and business model. So technology is phenomenal and is definitely something that is extremely important, but business model becomes very difficult to replicate, because once you've got it and once you got that edge, it's difficult to, it becomes part of the culture. And that's where large companies fail at. You know, they cannot change cultures quickly, whereas a startup is nimble. And if you're able to make, you know, bake it into your culture, then you've made it.
You know, I'd love if you'd expand upon this a bit. One of the things that I'd love to hear you talk about is the ways in which your current success is informed by the computer science degree versus the MBA degree. And we know a lot of innovators and entrepreneurs and founders may have between their team some technical skills and some business skills and some leadership skills. Where did you put together the pieces for you, and how do they serve you now?
I would say everything had a major impact, right? I mean, my computer engineering degree, my computer science minor, my work and experience, hands-on experience. I've done hardware, I've done software, I've done management, I've done sales, I've done customer service, and then my business degree. Everything, you know, provides you an edge and shines a light on something different, right? And it's key that you identify what is that and how can you continue to build on it. So it's, I've always felt that having a strong handle on both technical side, a technical aspect, and the business know-how, and having good soft skills. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance of soft skills in running a business, right? So having all of that together provides you an edge. If you're able to have a deep discussion with the techies of the house and understand and provide that, you know, vision in a way they understand it, but at the same time, you're able to define a business strategy and have a discussion with your stakeholders, whether you're their board members, your customers, your investors. All of that, you know, comes in extremely handy, and you got to play. You know, you got to be able to balance both sides of the house.
I think that, Raed, you bring up a really important point. We've actually, at Iowa State, when I'm working with the students, we are calling them, instead of soft skills, we're calling them the harder skills. There's the hard skills and the harder skills, because those are the skills that are really challenging to quantify. It's like the edge. So let me ask you, you know, you had this wonderful technical degree, and Iowa State, you know, is really excellent at that. What didn't you learn in school, and where did you learn it? Some of those harder skills. So what didn't you learn in school, and where did you find yourself, oh my gosh, I have to know this, and then where did you learn it?
I mean, so that's a tough question, because I would say every day you're learning something new. And I've always, you know, when I use manage people or do performance reviews, or I always tell people, look, you know, if you're learning something new every day, then you're in a good spot. If you stop learning something new every day, start looking somewhere else, right? Because that's what it's supposed to be about, right? The job isn't about you just coming in 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 and get something done and move on. You're supposed to be enriching others and enriching yourself too. So I can't put my finger on one thing that I can tell you, this I learned in school and that I learned, you know, elsewhere. I would say the ability to have a proper one-on-one discussion, reading body language, understanding when someone says something, what do they really mean, trying to get to the real, you know, reason behind someone's action or what they're saying. These things, I think, take experience. These things take some time. It's difficult to teach those things because it's not a one rule, right? It's not something you can get from a book. But then the fundamentals, right? The fundamentals of business, finance, marketing. That's my MBA degree helped me tremendously. The fundamentals of how do you actually think logically. How do you break things down? That's my engineering degree for sure. So I would say that's how I'd break it down to.
Thank you so much. We actually have a question already in the chat from Amir. And Amir wants to know, what are the challenges in doing international business? Because we know that it's not traditional and you have to really take into account a lot of things, maybe different cultures, customs, and business models. It's a completely different world. So could you talk about some of the challenges, but also the advantages of doing business internationally?
Absolutely. It's a fantastic question, by the way. And look, so if you're doing international business in general, you absolutely need to recognize that culture is a huge factor in what you do, and you need to spend the time to learn the culture. You need to spend the time in understanding, what matters and what doesn't matter. Don't come in with your, prejudgments or stereotypes. And unfortunately, when you live in the US, there's plenty of those that are being taught to you. So even though I'm originally from the Middle East, coming back from the Middle East, from the US, over 20 years in the US, I had to also, spend the extra effort to acclimate myself and say, okay, well, this is what can be done, this is what can't be done. In the US, you're very quick to say, just jump into the point and let's have the proper discussion. Internationally, in certain cultures, you need to build up to it, right? There needs to be some level of trust, some level of confidence between the two. So that's an important thing. The other thing that I would highlight is, if you are doing international business for a US company, and that's an important thing, you spend as much time as you spend in learning the culture, spend in advocating back to headquarters or wherever that is about the business and the region you're in, because unfortunately there is plenty of stereotypes or factors that potentially would go against you. So you need to become an advocate for your region and your business back to your headquarters or your home base.
If we could go a little further with this, Raed, I wonder if we could start to talk more about El Grocer in this context. And, one of the things that some of our audience members might say is, oh, well, it's like Instacart, right? So maybe that's a little bit true, but it's probably equally not true. There's cultural differences. There may be differences in your business model. Could you talk a bit about how El Grocer is unique and different from models that some of our students might recognize in the United States? Sure.
I mean, so it is very similar to the concept of Instacart, right? So, and as a matter of fact, I think we both started almost around the same time. So one of the things that's unique about us is that we were actually the very first grocery marketplace that started. And we went live beginning of 2016. I believe Instacart had gone live about the middle of 2015. And I always tell people, I do a bunch of advisory for entrepreneurs, and there's a nonprofit that I'm part of that supports entrepreneurs. And I say, look, the idea by itself, of course, is important. Having a good idea, having something of what you're going to do is extremely important, but the execution is more important. And being able to take a concept and adapt it to the local market and figure out how you carry it out and how do you execute it is extremely important. Now, with regards to differences between us and Instacart, in the US, Instacart is built on a base of freelancers, and they don't have to worry about any employees or growing that base of employees, and which is starting to cause them some trouble back in the West Coast and other places. But in our region, the concept of freelancers does not exist as much, and people need to be employed by someone. And so you now have a lot more responsibility, because if you're not growing, or if your size is decreasing, then that has a direct impact on people's livelihoods, right? It's not like, oh, I'm not going to send an order to this freelancer. I need to keep a very close eye on efficiencies and productivity, so I don't overhire, and so that I don't have to make any corrective actions down the road. Having gone through being forced to lay off about 150 people in one shot, I don't really want to go through that again if I don't have to. So that's just one area where we're different. There are a number of others. We continue to look at in the regions where we're doing business, there are still, for example, credit card penetration isn't that high, which means you still have to handle cash. And one of the things that people will tell you, handling cash throughout a very complicated logistics chain is one of the most difficult things that you'd have to do. So these are just types of things that you got to be aware of when you're taking an idea and adapting it to a new place.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Going further from that, one of the things we often hear people talk about with regard to entrepreneurship and business models is the fact that you may have a great idea, you may be ready to execute, but often when you have contact with the market, you may have to adjust. You may find that your model needs to shift. You may find that customers need slightly different things than you thought they did. Could you talk a little bit about that discovery process as you evolved, how you provided services to your market?
Absolutely. So in entrepreneurship speak, they call it the pivot, right? So you're on a path, and then you discover that you need to make a change, and so you pivot onto another place. We've actually had to do that, and we've done that, a couple of times. So the first one was out of when we started in 2016. The plan was to stay extremely asset light, and very similar to what the Instacart does. Just provide a technology platform and connect, everybody, and let them do business together, right? And we discovered quickly that worked, but people only trusted it for the convenience items. If they needed something to top up their refrigerator with, or if they needed, end of the night, a bag of chips, a can of Coke, whatever it is, it's things that they're okay to have someone else pick up for them quickly. But we struggled with getting that basket to become bigger and bigger, and it becomes richer. Our business is built on having, a very rich set of content, so we can actually see data, and we can start, doing analysis with data. And it's difficult to do that when the basket has always got, a bag of chips and a can of Coke. So what we've done is said, well, look, what's the reason? And we've done some interviews and we checked why. And people weren't trusting that the supermarket or whoever is going to pick the right, goods for them, the best from the top of the pile rather than from the bottom, the fresh stuff rather than near expiry. And so what we've done is we pivoted and we decided, no, we're going to change. We're going to focus, instead of focusing on convenience supermarkets, we're going to go and partner up with the largest hypermarkets. And instead of relying on the supermarkets doing the delivery and doing the picking, we're going to put our own employees, and we're going to put them dressed in our own uniforms. So when people walk through the supermarkets, they see our team picking orders for others, and they can see how they're picking the best off the top of the pile. And that started building up confidence, and our average basket value tripled. So we started seeing significant increase. Our number of orders grew, and we started seeing richer baskets, right? Instead of having 1 or 2 items, we now have baskets of 30 items. Mm-hmm. And so that's a wealth of data we can go and dig into. So that's one time when we've had to make a pivot, and we looked at the data and we saw that the result that we were hoping for.
I love that moment, because one of the things that I hear in that is, as an entrepreneur, that excitement of you recognize this issue and you make a change, and then you see that result tripled. You got to just feel the rush. I wonder if you could maybe share a little more on that theme of what are the things that you find most rewarding and exciting about doing the work of whatever it is. It could be pivoting, it could be networking with clients. What are the most rewarding parts of working with Grocer?
So when we started in 2016, right, as I said, it was about we recognized that groceries is an important part of anybody's life, and online penetration at that time wasn't that high, and we actually got a lot of pushback to do this because there's not a lot of money margin profits in groceries, and everybody was talking about restaurant food delivery. That's where the real money is. But we kept pushing forward, and we felt, there is something that will validate what we believe in, that this is something important. Now, I wish we didn't have to go through it. We didn't have to go through it, but obviously during the COVID times, when we had to go through movement restrictions, and we had a lockdown period, albeit we were lucky enough that it was about a month rather than longer here. We were one of the few businesses that the government tagged as an essential service because people were not allowed to leave their houses, and we were an essential service to go and deliver people's groceries. Restaurants were closed, restaurant food delivery was closed, everything else. And that business became something completely different. Right. I mean, it was no longer about just making a buck or just, looking at profitability. Is making sure that people got their groceries, making sure that people didn't run out of their essentials. And in that time, we took another step and we said, well, if, we were in the largest cities, which makes a lot of sense for businesses like us, you want to be in the largest cities. That's where the population density is. But we said, well, if we have a business, we have a model, we have a technology, why should we not enable that everyone, whether they live in a small village or a town or a large city, they should be able to get their grocery without risking their their safety. And so in that very difficult time where we couldn't find enough people, we tripled our team at that time. We expanded the whole country coverage, and we made sure that everyone was able to order on our platform and get their groceries delivered to. So those were a couple of, aha moments where just validated what you were always, believed in. But it also gave us a much higher purpose for what we were doing.
Right. Anna, you had a question. You go, and then I'll go.
Thank you so much. And from design perspective, are all those insights in your head? Are they in your team? Do you have designers that are in the field observing the fluctuations of the market? How do you get those insights? And it's okay if you say, all in my head.
No, I wish actually. So one of the things that I could not learn, I mean, Karen asked me before, where do you learn everything? I'm an engineer. And I'm wired to be an engineer. So creativity and in terms of, design and all that doesn't come naturally for me. So I've got some fantastic designers on the team, and they do a lot of research, field research, competitive research. We look at internationally what's being done. And then what also happens is we are always cultivating and looking at the data. So I'll give you a case in point. We just recently, about a month ago, have done a complete revamp of our user interface for the applications. And we recognized, we were looking at how do we speed the whole process of ordering your groceries and checking out and everything. And believe it or not, we noticed that once we switched, our cancellation rate jumped. Our number of orders did not drop. Our cancellations rate jumped. everybody who canceled reordered again. We're like, what the heck? What's going on here? And so we started digging into the detail, and we discovered that we made the process for checking out so fast that people were checking out before they were actually recognized that they wanted to check out, and they actually closed it. And so we actually continue monitoring with it, and now the designers are making changes to kind of not slow down the process, but to highlight very clearly, you're checking out, you're paying here. So we do the research. The guys are on the field. I mean, this weekend, I think the guys are going and doing beta testing of a new feature. The designers are one of them. They're going to go through it to experience it. And then we continue to keep an eye on the data and just see what we learn from it.
I like that. I like the fact that you're saying, and you said it before, the business acumen, the technical skills, but also good soft skills. And I like that you are also including that it's not just the business, but there's multiple disciplines there in the way that you are talking, acknowledging that innovation is interdisciplinarity as well, and keeping an eye on data and keeping an eye on the user. So yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Nakaya, do you have questions?
I do. I have a question, but I'll start off with one that we have in the chat here from Emily. Does your service have loyalty programs tied to it like retailers do in the US? If so, how has that impacted your business?
Say that again. You cut out in the middle.
Yep. So does your service have loyalty programs tied to it like retailers do in the US? If so, how has that impacted your business?
It's a great question. We don't yet. We don't have a loyalty business that's tied to it. We are actually in discussions with a couple of big loyalty programs. So here, there are two schools of thoughts, right? You can go and create your own loyalty program where people can start gaining points or whatever and taking advantage or benefiting from continued use. Or you actually tap into an existing loyalty program where people are already in it, and so they're continuing to contribute to that loyalty program. To be honest, we haven't finalized or concluded which way is better. One thing we've done through our research, we found that startups, when they create their own loyalty programs, it doesn't get a lot of traction because people don't feel that there is enough in there for them to benefit, right? And we, when it comes to discounts, we do quite a good job working with our FMCG partners and our retail partners to bring exclusive discounts to our customers without having to have loyalty programs. So what we're looking at is to potentially tap into, there's a couple of loyalty programs that are associated with our telco providers here, and potentially tapping into those and having their members, get more benefits on our app, or our purchases contributing to those programs. But we haven't made a final decision on that yet.
Thank you. And then one question that I have is about persistence and perseverance, I'll say that. You mentioned a few minutes ago that you received a lot of pushback, right? At the beginning when you all were trying to pitch this idea. I want to know, what was your mindset when you received that pushback, and how did you get through it? And what pieces of advice would you give to young innovators who believe that they really have a great idea, but they're on the verge of giving up, or they're on the verge of just calling it quits? How do you know when to push forward or when to stop?
Great question. So number one is, don't be defensive, right? Take in the feedback, analyze it. Is the person highlighting something you haven't thought about before? Or are they providing you some insight you're not aware of, right? Because sometimes when you're, deep into starting something new, you can be blinded, right? You can have blinders on, and you could think that no, I've got it. And where in reality, there are other factors that you're not paying attention to. So whatever feedback you get, take it in, analyze it, absorb it, and just say, okay, is there something that it's actually fundamentally making a difference in what my assumptions were? And if the answer is no, your fundamentals are still sound, what you're looking to build is still solid, what they're highlighting you're aware of and you're planning for, and you have already considered it, then go forward, right? Continue. Now it's easier said than done, right? Because remember, as I said, we have to employ people, which means there is a cost, there are people, responsibilities, and so we need to make sure that what we're doing there's longevity, there is support. So we were not doing it out of just stubbornness, but we were convinced, we had a conviction that the fundamentals that we have built this business on made sense. There is scale. There is a continuous need for the service you're offering. There is additional areas where you can build other value once you hit a certain level of scale. So none of the feedback that we got at the time challenged those areas. It just was, why do this when that can give you so much more? And we believed in what we were doing then.
I have a question to follow up on some of that. So many questions. I mean, I just have a whole slew. But one of the things I'm realizing is food is a very intimate business, right? People's personal health. And there are risks, associated with that business, but also there are relationships you have to build. So local relationships of trust, relationships with suppliers. You probably have to inquire and follow up on things with suppliers to make sure they're trustworthy. Can you share a little bit about how you create that very compelling circle of trust and what you had to do to kind of innovate those relationships and build those communities so that people would trust you to deliver a product like food?
So that's always an extreme challenge, right? I mean, getting trust from your customers or your suppliers is something that you can't, there is no recipe for, right? What I would say is we're building a scalable business, and what we do has to be baked into our technology platform. It has to be baked into our process, our operational processes, and it has to be baked into our culture, right? And so if you've done that well enough, then you're able to grow the business more and more with having consistent execution across all of it. So our number one, we always say our North Star is customer delight. That's what we always aim for. And everything that we do has to build towards getting there. And we put our data metrics, we measure, and we keep an eye on that. And if anything starts veering off, we jump on it and say, okay, what's happening, and let's see what can be done there. We keep a very close eye on people's feedback about our retailers. We've fired retailers before, and it's because we've had and these are supposedly our suppliers that are allowing us to get us more orders. But if they're not providing the right quality, or if they're not providing consistent level of service, then they're causing more harm than good. So to me, in order for you to gain trust in a business like ours, you have to be consistent. People need to know what they expect, and they know they're going to get what they expect from you. Build your value proposition, make it very clear to people what you stand for, and day in and day out, go out there to do it exactly the same way every day.
I want to follow up on the value proposition, because we've been talking a lot about that with our, especially our graduate, undergraduate students, because they are working, part of their requirement regardless of what career they're in, is to write that value proposition. And it's like this big mystery, right? So they know how to write what they're going to do, what they're going to transact. But a value proposition is something very different. Can you share, for you, when you think about writing your value proposition and putting together your value proposition, what were the elements you included in your value proposition? And specifically the most important ones.
So it's an extremely interesting question, because we've just gone through an exercise of doing a bit of a, I don't want to say rebranding, but we're tweaking our brand and our messages and our communications. And one of it is our slogan. And the reason why we've done that. So when we started, just to be we said groceries made easy was our slogan, right? And the idea was, you know, it's a complicated thing. It's a chore. You have to go park, stand in line, do all that. We're making that easy for you. Since COVID, a lot of competition jumped in, and a lot of competition started, you know, putting a lot of money and trying to get to this convenience item where I can get you your groceries in 15 minutes, in 30 minutes, whatever you need, right? And they're typically small basket orders. So we had to take a couple steps back, and we say, okay, well, that's cool. We've got competition now. Let's just, you know, let's see how do we continue? What is it that we want to make sure that people know about us? What is our value proposition? So our number one was to really nail down our value proposition. Is you had to know, well, who's your consumer? Who's your customer? Who are you actually serving, right? And once you know who you're serving, what is it that you're doing, right? What? So we've clearly identified that families is who we're serving, right? We are in a country where there is a significant percentage of young single professionals. It's a very young country with a lot of expats. 90% of the population here are actually foreigners, expats, and they come in for, you know, a job for a couple of years and then they go back. And so there's a lot of businesses focused on that. Whereas we decided, no, we're focusing on families, people who actually value quality, people who value consistency, people who value the ability to provide a variety of products so that they can do their weekly and monthly shopping without having to, you know, risk their safety or having to battle the crowds. And so we, clearly identified that because we have our own people in the stores and we do our own deliveries and we have the largest hypermarkets, that made a lot of sense to just highlight that. So we've called it, you know, we are the family's grocer, right? We are your grocer. It's back to the olden days, the grocer that you trust, back to your word, that you've got, you know, you can rely on to get you exactly what you want, the best of the pickings that you want, and you have nothing to worry about. And we started building in some personalization features in the product so that when you order your avocados, we know how you like them, right? You don't have to tell us twice. We would remember, and we can get you those again the same way. So that's what we're focusing on. And that's what we believe is our value proposition. Now, that helps us a lot once we try to grow outside the UAE into places where it's more of a traditional society, where family is the core of the fabric of the society, and we've got a significant advantage there.
Wow. Micaiah?
I absolutely love that tagline. As a communicator, so I'll say that. But also, I was thinking about this earlier as you were talking, and then in previous conversations that we've had with you. You all are really branding yourselves as an advocate for the people that you serve, right? You're being extremely cautious about the different kinds of fruits or vegetables that you're picking out. You are open totally on board with firing retailers when they're not meeting that need. And you're basically creating this safety net around the families that you're providing for. And so there's this sense of security that they're getting with you all that they might not get with other people. So I totally think that that's a great approach. I'm really excited to hear more and just to see how this whole rebrand goes for you all. That's amazing.
Thank you. Definitely will keep you in touch, and we'd love to get some of your inputs also. It's now that I've got hooked into a designer and a communicator, and so I'm all good. I'm set.
And an innovator. I have another big question for you, and just because the way you think is so fascinating, I love how you're integrating human connection, community, family, your personal values, the capacity. What I'm seeing in you is this really compelling desire and personal value of wanting to be able to have an co-influential relationship with people. I'm influencing them. What I do is influencing them. What they do is influencing me. And that's kind of a really novel approach to business, I think, where there's that sort of intimacy. And I think, of course, that's a customer loyalty program. So now I'm thinking, all right, now let's talk about casting for the future. You know, when we hear people like Daniel Pink saying most of this is going to be automated or offshored or so on and so forth, I'm thinking grocery is such a traditional, you're going back to family values. You're going back to traditional service and support. Okay, what does the grocery of the future look like? Let's say 20 years from now, where are we going and how are you heading there?
Look, I do believe there's going to be a huge role for automation and technology. It's any business that has a strong element of repetition, and when you're getting the same thing over and over from the same place or to the same destination, that's a ripe for automation, and it's ripe for technology to come in. So I would love to say no, it's going to be groceries will continue and you will have, but there is going to be in my view, more and more focus on specialization, right? So, automation requires scale. Automation requires big volumes for it to become something that makes sense. And so your very high volume items, that are able to stand on, for a long shelf life make a lot of sense. But then, believe it or not, we may quickly go back to the good old days where you had your butcher with their own shop, right? And because that's a fresh cut and that's something that needs to be delivered exactly how you want it, and very, very quick. You got your baker that is able to give you your gluten-free, vegan, dairy-free bread because you have that need for it. So I believe we're moving back to the good old times, if you want to call them that, where people had specialties and they focus on those specialties rather than everything was in this big box supermarket. I think the dates for the big box supermarkets are short, and that they're going to be facing a huge amount of pressure. Today, we're already there, by the way. We're already seeing a need and a movement where we find these items, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 different types of items, and we create these small fulfillment centers that are peppered around the city, and they call them a dark store. And those dark stores don't allow consumers to come in. They only have motorized, automated fulfillment centers in there. And the delivery person comes at the window, scans their smartphone, and they get the basket for the order, and they go and they deliver it. So the days for the large supermarket are counted, and I think we're going back to specialization.
Like art, right? I mean, you're talking about really artists and art and education, right? Because then the consumer begins to think about, and maybe here's where the future of groceries is, right? In educating the consumer about quality, about cuts of meat. Because I don't know very many consumers who know how to pick or who would know how to pick. So it seems to me that your human approach to business is education will be much easier for you in term as you grow that. It's intriguing when you talk about the art and the specialization components.
Could I have a quick follow-up to pick up your brains? So the future of grocering and the grocery future. I have 3 kids, and the youngest for quite a long time in Europe was convinced that milk came from the package. I'm sure that the story resonates with everyone. And then here in the Netherlands, she saw the cows, and here we took her to a farm, and her whole world exploded. So my question is loaded, of course, for the next generation. So automation, dark stores, and everything that you're talking makes sense in my mind, but for the young generation that's yet to come, the generation that doesn't have a letter.
So I missed the question though. Everything I agree with you so far. What's the question?
No, I'm just like puzzled with the future. What would be the grocery act? What would be the grocery interactions? Do they go to the primary place where the milk comes from the cow? Will we have interactions and let's go for an art activity and it's, getting the major.
Well, I mean,
Sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just picking your brain.
I think you're absolutely right, and I would love to be able to claim that I know exactly what that vision will happen. I think what I see is, I have a 20-year-old daughter and I have a 12-year-old son. And I see them, having no interest, right, to be involved in the actual grocery or the supermarket. But my daughter loves to, cook and come up with some new things. And so when she picks what she wants to do, right, she is extremely picky and she wants to pick what she wants. Or, if she's on the keto diet, she wants to have those people that make everything for that. Or if she's on the dairy-free diet. And so my point is having that specialization and having that care presented, right, in what you're offering your consumers is what will differentiate you. I think we're going to see more and more experience-driven retail that is focused on specialties.
Yeah, I was just going to ask in this direction, because it seems like what you're describing is that, organizations like El Grocer are taking the friction out of purchasing specialized artisanal goods. And then the question becomes, well, what's the next point of friction? Well, if I can get any highly specialized artisanal good from anywhere, the next point of friction is deciding, right? And what to do with that. So then hence the experience. I need a curated experience. How do I cook with these new ingredients? How do I engage with them in a way to learn about them? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
What differentiates us from others is everybody else in the market look at the actual transaction of buying something and getting it delivered. We actually look at grocery as a full experience. And so we recognize that, as you said, once you've removed the friction of ordering, choosing what you want is important. And so we're the only one that's built in a recipe boutique, where we've, engaged with a number of chefs that are able to show you how to make different, recipes. And then you can buy the whole set of ingredients from us to make that happen. We're also looking at, increasing that and allowing people to share their own recipes, right? And so we can have some more, social sharing. And actually, one thing that we're hoping to do is to make that more of a revenue driver for some of, upcoming chefs. If someone has got a really great recipe and it's driving, sales, why shouldn't they get some benefit for that? So we look at all of areas of, the experience, and choosing what are we going to make for dinner tomorrow or for lunch tomorrow should no longer be a daily challenge for everybody. Launch the app and it can suggest something for you.
It strikes me as so wonderful. What a wonderful framing story is what drove you out of your last business was how relationships are released and let go, and people, losing people and kind of walking away from those people. And what's driving you here is to create these communities of belonging around something really primitive and very intimate: food, sharing meals. And what you're talking about is basically having our chefs be part of your family meal. And then we're going to invite you to invite us into your family meal by sharing your recipes. This idea of really, no matter how technologically oriented we become, what I see that you're emphasizing is we are still family. We still are going to move into your home. We still have to eat. We still want eating to be a pleasurable, sociable activity. This is very admirable. But again, I come back to your value, because when I think about value proposition, underlying your compelling value proposition is keeping humans together, is bringing humans together around things that are really important to them, but also create community. It's very inspiring and compelling. I love the story that you're creating. So I'm going to ask you a question. What does your culture and your experience of growing up in a very specific culture, how did that nurture your unique brand of innovation? And this sort of focus and value, this innovator's value on community and relationship brokering?
It's a great question. I mean, so myself, I've moved with my family many different places. I think last time I counted, I've lived in about 7 different countries throughout my life, and many more cities. I was born in Europe. I grew up in Saudi Arabia and Middle East, and then I moved and did my education in the US. And I'm originally from neither one of these places, so we've been moving all over the place. And so what moving and what adapting to new places allows you to be resilient, allows you to be adaptive, allows you to be innovative, if you will, in dealing with change to you. That's one aspect. The other aspect shows you the importance of family, right? Because that's the one thing that's consistent, that's with you, and that you can count on. So for me, family has always been a crucial part of my life, and from a value system that's extremely high, and then being able to adapt. I mean, I moved to Ames in December '89. And you can from Saudi, and you can look at the history records. It was the coldest winter on history, 40 degrees below, and I adapted and I innovated. So a lot of things can teach you that.
Oh my gosh. I will follow up with another question too, because speaking of adaptation and innovation, we all face some unbearable barriers and challenges and risks that are really character defining and help determine and drive our path, and often drive innovation, right? And drive what we're going to create. Can you think of a story and share a story around a particularly difficult barrier and challenge, and what it drove you to do that was really influential around your path?
Yeah, I mean, it's I would say, you know, everything we do. And again, it's not, I wish I can claim that everything has to come from me. As a team, right? We work together in tackling everything. And so we identify issues together, and we look at potential solutions together, and then we solve, you know, we implement and we fix. So in my view, one of the things that we have done recently is to start bringing on a lot of these, as you call them, artisan, you know, stores or innovators where they can make their own, you know, keto ice cream, and they need to bring that to consumers. The challenge that we've all come across was, well, today we're built on a one-on-one basis where we've identified that, you know, you have to place an order from that keto ice cream place, and that order has to fulfill all the checks of the minimum size and the cost, the average service fee, and so on. And we've found that this is a hurdle, because if I'm looking to try out keto ice cream, I'm not going to go buy a couple of gallons so I can hit that minimum balance. Or I'm looking to buy a pint, I don't want to go and pay, you know, $3-4, you know, bucks of service fees. So we started looking into actually innovating that and say, well, how can I allow someone to buy, you know, Italian fresh pasta with some organic tomatoes from another place, with fresh, you know, gluten-free bread from a third place, and then top it off with the keto ice cream, and get that all done in one order with one service fee, and get delivered at once. And so we're close. I'm getting very close to making that happen. That's one of our biggest challenges. To
And
make
we're
that
all
happen.
getting
We've
very
got some solutions in place.
and we're all getting very hungry and thinking about like the delicious things that you are selling now.
Soon we'll
So,
deliver the names.
So does your team have a specific design process? Like when you're overcoming a challenge like that, you're innovating. I love, you know, hearing what you're having to innovate around. Can I identify a process when your team works through these things together? Like, is there okay, first we do this, then we do that, then we look at this, and then we implement this way?
So that's, we do everything step by step. And because we've got a lot of people on our team with great ideas, and if we just go jump in, you know, head first into an idea, we can miss a lot of different details. So what we do is we take the concept, the challenge, and try to get as much data around it first to be able to validate what actually is the problem, and, you know, let me understand everything that is contributing to that problem. And then we start, you know, brainstorming a number of different possible solutions, right? Now, we're gonna pick one, but we're not gonna go and implement that possible solution, because most of the time, these are not small problems, which means they're not small solutions. They're big solutions that require either a lot of investment or a lot of setup. So what we then say, well, okay, fine. If I take that big solution, I'm gonna put that investment to make it happen. How can I prove step by step that I'm on the right direction? So as I told you, my number one challenge, or my number one assumption for why people are not putting orders, is they don't want to pay a service fee, and it's too much to buy a big basket. I'll give them a month where they can order a pint of ice cream. No service fee, no basket minimum. And let me see, can I get my orders to increase 50%? Is there a pent-up demand in there that they're just held back by not having, you know, that hurdle there? If I can make that happen, then I say, okay, well, now they still have to place 5 different orders, right? But what if I now let them place that one order together? I'll send someone to 5 different places to gather it, but they need to place, you know, one order with one service fee. And if I get that, then I can go and start taking, well, why don't I start building in some more, dedicated warehousing and storage and so on. But you got to do it step by step, knock down the problem. My ultimate solution, I know what I want to do, but I'm not going to go do it just because I think that's the right way. I got to break it down in pieces and validate every step.
Yeah, beta testing and validating and building and growing. Fabulous. These are all great, great discussion points for our innovators. Abram, I bet you this resonates with you too.
So definitely. One of the things that I'm kind of reflecting on is, especially as we talk about all these possibilities, is Raed, how you think about focus and prioritization. So, you started off consulting, you explored probably, and just being a part of the entrepreneurship network where you're at, I'm sure there's no shortage of intriguing projects you could also be doing or be doing next. And then within your own company, you're already talking about all these different directions you can go in. How do you think about balancing exploration with not overextending yourself or getting too far out in front with an idea that's not ready yet?
I mean, again, it's you gotta continuously challenge yourself to prove what you believe is right? You're number one. Our resources are always tight. Doesn't matter how well funded you are, you're going to be limited. And more importantly, your people's resources are also limited, right? And that's even the more difficult one to go and expand on. So I've got a long list of things that, not just me, the whole team of the company has got a long list of things that we would love to go and do. But we got to continuously prioritize. And again, regardless, even if we prioritize when we find something, we can't go and commit significant amount of resources, whether it's time or money, without validating step by step that we're on the right direction. We can't let our egos get ahead of us. We can't let our personalities dominate. We've got to ground ourselves with data and with taking things and validating things one step at a time, but do it quickly so we don't get run up by our competition either.
How do you so I really love you talk about your team quite a bit and not moving too fast, not moving too slow, not let egos get in the way. I am really curious now to look at that window because since family is such a value, how do you treat your team? How do you build the human beings and innovate opportunities for them? How are you innovative in your human resourcing?
So that's a great question. And one of the things that we've put in place, so one of the things that actually I learned from Motorola. Motorola was a fantastic company to work with, and they had a huge amount of emphasis on people and on their people and growing their people. Startups are not known for bringing strong HR types of processes in place because they're viewed as slowing you down. We've actually implemented not just performance reviews, but career reviews, and looking forward on, how to mentor our own people to see how can we progress, their careers and how can we progress their skill sets. That's one. The other thing is that all startups do this, but it's an important thing, which is people, the team members and the family members get shares in the company. They get vested into the company. They get, bought into the company. And so they become part owners of what they're building, what they're growing. Now, that has a huge impact. And in the US, this is actually quite common, right? And when you go to, Silicon Valley, people always talk about stock options and how. In the Middle East, that hasn't really reached there as much, right? You can get stock options if you're very senior level in the company, but in the person who is picking the groceries wouldn't have dreamt of it, right? And you're talking about people that are barely making, $800 a month as salary, right? So again, you got to adjust for income, but they're getting shares in the company, and now their whole perspective is changing, right? Because now they're no longer just a very junior employee; they're partly my boss, and so it's it changes the discussions quite a bit.
So you extended your family value to your employees.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. It's still the trend throughout everything that you're doing, which is fantastic. We have one question here from Emily, and it's more of an operational question. Are there rules and guidelines for the people who pick their items in a certain order to ensure product quality and consistency? For example, would they pick the milk and the perishable meats last instead of at the beginning of the order?
Absolutely. So we get the packed goods first, the what's called the CPG, the consumer packaged goods first, and then you go into we place the orders for specialty items. Most of the hypermarkets we've got, they have butcheries or deli and all that. Get that placed, go pick your fresh, come back, pick up the specialties, and the last thing is you get your frozens. You got to keep it frozen to the last. Package everything, check it out, and go deliver it. Pretty much the same thing that you would do when you go shop for your groceries.
Who's next? Abram, do you have more questions?
I just want to say that this has been just such a fascinating conversation, and I love particularly how you're modeling for our students how really it's just a series of you balance vision, but you really are so cogent in explaining how you work through the problems that you have to solve. So I just want to thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to hear you speak about the work you're doing.
Thank you. Again, I think it's my engineering training, right? I mean, it's taking everything down to a analyzing. So it may drive some of my people, some of my team crazy. Probably drives my wife crazy, but otherwise than that, it helps a lot. It's great, by the way. My partner, in Grocer, comes from a marketing background, comes from a FMCG background. I come from a telecom and engineering background, and it's great to have someone that complements you. So that way they can highlight things that are blind spots for you, and you can do the same thing for them. So that's something that I would highly recommend for anyone if they've got an inkling to go and start something, is partner up with someone who complements you and helps you build something together.
I also want to point out that even though you keep saying you're an engineer, I really think engineers, what they bring uniquely to humans is they also do human engineering, relationship engineering, community engineering. They actually take that desire for systems and processes in order and bring it into human behaviors. And that has just huge benefits, and we've seen that in the way you approach your company. I think that what is quite magical about the way in which you're approaching your business is that you made human engineering as much more a part of your business than the engineering of the transaction themselves. That, I think, is just such a fabulous lesson for the future of innovation for our young people. So I'm incredibly grateful.
Don't misunderstand me. I'm extremely proud of being an engineer, and I do believe, as you said, that way of thinking helps quite a bit. But I've also recognized that there are other areas. So as I said, creative thinking doesn't come logically the way that engineers are trained to do. my brother is actually an architect, and he graduated from Iowa State, and I think he may have spoken in part of an architecture college also before, and the way that he thinks, right, is extremely different and enlightening for me. My sister graduated from the design college in Iowa State, and the way that she thinks. So I'm very proud of being an engineer, but it's also, I recognize there are different ways of tackling something, and you gotta bring complementary thoughts and ways of thinking into the problem to figure out the best approach forward.
Yeah, and I even love that you talk about this family of creativity and creative people as well. It doesn't surprise me that your siblings graduated from Iowa State. I think we have a legacy of producing some very creative people. Anna, did you have a question before we end?
Not a question, but also to complement. I don't know, we had for the past months lots of innovators coming here, and our students are pointing that they always started with the hardest, but it's a compliment. I also find that you are so aware that soft skills are the hardest, and you are like a great example and a role model for our students in the way that you talk and you explain your projects and your dreams and your vision. And the soft spoken that we saw today is a very good balance with going for the hardest of putting a business together. So thank you very much. And thank you for shouting out for the College of Design and your siblings.
What I love is that his whole family is like a walking advertisement for the creativity inspired in Iowa State.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you so much. No, thank you.
We're always keeping you close, I think. Raed, I just want to say thank you for your time, and I really look forward. I'm sure there are a lot of students that would love to continue to connect, and we certainly are going to connect again, because I have a feeling this is just the beginning of an innovator adventure. So thank you for your time, and I will share also thank you to Nikaya, Anna, Abram, and Spencer. And for those of you listening, thank you as well. Next week, by the way, as we always end with what's next, we have two things next. Our deans, speaking of family and community, our deans, Dean Laura Jolly, Dean Sam Easterling, who is the Dean of Engineering College, and the Vice President John Lawrence of Extension and Outreach are going to be talking about how to build relationships that to make friends and influence people. So they are the Dale Carnegie of Iowa State. We're having that conversation on Monday. You can register. And the other thing that we're going to be doing next week, you really don't want to miss, there is a semiconductor shortage. And in part that's brought about by shortage of labor, a shortage of equipment, by trade sanctions. So the actual interview candidate we are interviewing next week is the biggest innovator brain in the universe. And we are interviewing the semiconductor. So the semiconductor is going to be the subject of our innovator forum next week. And we're going to be exploring all things semiconductor, how it affects the supply chain, how you may not be able to buy your PlayStation, how it'll affect technology, your carts, whatever it might be. So as you join us next week, we have David Slump, who is the president of Harman Global Connected Services, and Dr. Chen, our own Dr. Chen from the supply chain from Iowa State University, having a conversation and kind of exploring the semiconductor as the brain of most of our technology. So a little different, a little innovative, and Raed, you're welcome to join us. So thank you.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Right. Bye, team.
Thank
See
you
next
so
week.
much.
Thank you.
Innovation
Bye-bye.
anywhere.